Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Piwe Ndlovu, and I'm working for the Gauteng Department of Economic Development under the unit called BBE. Today, I will be talking to you about local content and production compliance. This presentation will be divided into two parts. The first part will be looking into the context, the understanding of what is local content and why are we doing it. And the second part of the presentation will be looking at the documentation for local content so that we can be able to understand all the documentation that we need to complete as suppliers when we are bidding for tenders or quotation that talks to local content. The presentation, the overall presentation content will cover these following items. It will be the purpose, the background, designated sectors, tender process. We'll be looking into the documentation, which forms part of part 2 of the presentation, local content verification, and we'll draw some conclusion, and I will share some contacts with you. The next slide here is basically to give you an overview of the department that I'm working for, which is the Gauteng Department of Economic Development. The main objective or the aim of the department is to lead, facilitate, and manage sustainable job creation and inclusive economic growth and development in the Gauteng City region. When we're talking about Gauteng City region, we're talking about all the 5 corridors that makes Gauteng province. And those corridors, it's City of Johannesburg, City of Tshwane, City of Ekurhuleni, Sedibeng, and Western. Therefore, the department will be playing the facilitation role. In order for the department to achieve this, there are also what we call implementing agencies that assist in implementing this objective of the department. Over and above that, the department works with partners in order to assist with economic growth and development and to proactively link communities to economic opportunities. As I have mentioned that I'm working for the BBE unit, the unit's mandate is to effectively monitor the implementation of BBE in the Gauteng province. By that, we are looking at the government department, agencies, and municipalities. The GPG, GPG as Gauteng Provincial Government has set some procurement targets in terms of we need to understand when we're doing procurement, who are we procuring from, the type of entities that we are procuring from in terms of their sizes and their makeup, in terms of their ownership structures. And as you can see, those are all the targets. But because today we are talking to local content, the main focus of our discussion will be on this red highlighted one, which is the 75% on South African manufactured product. This is purely to say, as South Africa, we need to come to a point where we are not just distributors and consumers of products. We need to be able to manufacture and distribute our own product and consume our same product. And this is actually linked to even what the Premier was saying in terms during the SOPA, to say one of the role is basically to develop township economy. And by so doing, we need to be able to identify small businesses in our township that can start to manufacture. If those companies are not at the level where we want to see them at, we will use through BE enterprise and supplier development budget, skills development budget to empower and upskill them to be able to meet the standard and the quality of what is expected so that we can begin to produce, manufacture, and consume our own product, even in the township, but also in Gauteng and furthermore in South Africa as a country. So why are we here? The objective is basically to provide a background and an overview of legislation guiding us as government entities with regard to local content. Also to outline the designated sectors and thresholds that are linked to those sectors. We will at a later stage look at the local content documentation, which is the standard bidding document 6.2 and the annexures C, D, and E. In terms of the background as to why are we now focusing on local content, like I initially said that local content, it's really about developing our own. Instead of us being the consumers and distributors of imports, we need to now start focusing on manufacturing our own. And this, it's actually through the new growth path and industrial policy action plan. The procurement has been identified as a lever to be able to achieve that. And how we're going to do that is through designating sectors. And by designating sectors, we know that manufacturing has got the potential of creating jobs. So if we are focusing on manufacturing, then we are able to create jobs and we are able to build skills and we are even able to improve productivity and growing our own economy by so doing. And there will be even competition in terms of the different sectors, because we will know that we will have a pool of suppliers, we have a pool of enterprises that can supply us with all those products that we are looking for in the different sectors. And then we can be able to export instead of always importing. And perhaps also to touch on the regulatory form, to say local content is not something that just came from nowhere, but it was supported by legislation. Since the launch of IPAP 2 in 2011 in April, the following reforms took place. There was a gazetting of PPPFA regulation, which was 2017, and recently now the 2017. With that regulation, what we saw happening is that the DTI was able to identify sectors that were designated for local content, so that when we procure as state entities, then we can know that those product has been designated. And that was implemented on the 7th of December 2011. Following that was the instruction notes issued by the National Treasury for all those designated sectors, informing government entities as to how to go about and what will be the minimum threshold per sector that has been designated. We need to also know and understand that designation is a continuous process. Therefore, research will continue happening for other sectors to be designated at the later stage. And then there was that alignment of PPPFA with BE objectives. Then the question is, what is local content? Local content is that portion of the product whose manufacturing processes take place within South Africa from inputs material, raw materials, and or component that were sourced in South Africa. So when we say local, local means South Africa. It doesn't mean a ward, it doesn't mean a township. But here, when we talk local, we mean South Africa. It is also important to note that when we're talking local content knows no color, knows no BE element. It's really about the base. Where is this product manufactured? Where are the inputs sourced? Where are the raw materials sourced? Where are the components sourced? If we can say all those things are sourced from South Africa, then we know we have satisfied that criteria of local content. In terms of the new regulation, the law as I said, there were different reforms that took place from 2011 to 2017. So local content under 2011 was actually within Section 9 of the new regulations 2011. But with 2017, it is under Section 8. And nothing has changed from that. And basically what it says is that organ of state in the case of designated sectors when in the award of tenders, local production and content is of critical importance. We need to advertise such tenders with specific tendering conditions that only locally produced goods, services and work or locally manufactured goods with a stipulated minimum threshold for local production and content will be considered. So when we are advertising tenders, like for example, for local content, one of the documents that we'll be using for that is the SBD 6.2 or MBD 6.2. SBD if it's the department and its entities, MBD if it's the municipalities and their entities. So there is a section where we need to actually put even there to say we are procuring this product and state the minimum threshold. So even on the tender, when we advertise, we should also stipulate that only locally manufactured goods or services or product will be acceptable. Anything that is not local and that is not meeting those stipulated minimum threshold will not be considered. The National Treasury issues instruction notes, circular and guidelines to all organ of state with specific reporting mechanism to ensure compliance with this legislation. Where there is no designated sector, an organ of state may include as a specific tendering condition that only locally produced services, works, or goods or locally manufactured goods with stipulated minimum threshold for local production and content will be considered on condition that such prescript and threshold are in accordance with the specific directive issued for this purpose by the National Treasury in consultation with the Department of Trade and Industry. For example, the Gauteng Provincial government has adopted what we call local content framework. In that framework, the whole idea or the objective of that idea is really to develop township economy using local content to make sure that goods that will be procured, actually we have the capacity in the township to manufacture those goods. For example, what I'm trying to say here is perhaps maybe the department in the province, we can decide that detergents, we know many companies in the township are manufacturing detergents, and we decide that when we're gonna be procuring detergent, we are gonna put in a specific tendering condition that we want to procure them from locally manufactured. So this clause basically says that currently detergents are not designated. However, as a province, we can actually include that specific tendering condition that only locally produced work services will be considered, and we put a minimum threshold. However, we would have consulted with National Treasury and the DTIC to actually verify and give us an approval in terms of the threshold that would have considered or put there. So therefore, even if we've got that power, it has to be in consultation with National Treasury and the Department of Trade and Industry. And every tender that has got to do with local content is gonna go through auditing processes. And this auditing processes only happens after the award of the tender. So none of the people who are participating in any local content tender will be audited or will be subjected to auditing process before the award. It will be after the award, and the people who will be subjected to the auditing process is those who won that bid. This is a designation process flow that the DTI follows before any sector is designated. Hence, even there, that section where I said the provincial government can actually designate and it can designate a sector, but they has to consult with DTI and the National Treasury to get that final approval. So it will go through that process. A process is like this. Before designation takes place, firstly, there is industrial or sector research and review. This is to check what is happening in terms of that product. It's to check, do we have the capacity and the capability in the country to actually manufacture? Where is the dominance of these products? Do we have all the inputs and the raw materials in the country to even say, therefore, we are designating? So those are the things that will be taking place during the research. And then after that, there is a consultation. And by the way, this research and consultation is taking place with the industry specialist. So the captain of industry will be involved to inform the process as well. After consultation, we have approval by the DTI. After that is the designation. Because everything was approved, then the designation of that specific sector, and then the issuing of the gazette to inform the public and inform government that this sector has been gazetted. That will be done by the National Treasury. They send that information through the head of department to inform us that this has been designated and these are the minimum threshold, because they are the one responsible for instruction notes. This is basically to show you the designated sectors that are there. This is not all the sectors. So if you really want to get to see the whole list of designated sectors, please check the DTIC website under the industrial development and you go under designated sectors. You will see a list of all those that are designated. Remember, we said local content is that portion of the product whose manufacturing processes take place within South Africa from input material, raw material, and or component that were sourced. So this basically talks to that, to say all this in terms of the minimum threshold, the inputs, the raw material, the components were sourced in the country. Let's make an example. People who normally participate in the school uniform tender by social development or education, school uniform falls within textile, clothing, leather, and footwear, and it is designated at 100%. So when you are gonna be responding to that tender of school uniform, you need to know that school uniform forms part of this. Therefore, you need to actually give us 100% of the components must be produced in the country. Another example is people who are in the construction industry. Construction as a service, it's not designated. However, the components that goes into construction and some of the input material that goes into construction is also designated. So the construction people, these are some of the things that will affect you. You are building an RDP house because Human Settlement awarded you that tender, and part of this is to put your solar geysers. So you will see solar water heater components are there, and normally it comes with electricity, so electrical cables are there. All the valves that you will be using for plumbing and all those are there. We are using prepaid electricity meters now. The prepaid electricity meter is designated at 70. I must also include cement, which on my list it's not appearing. Cement is also designated. Please check that website that I spoke to you about in terms of the DTIC for you to get a whole list of all the designated material. Another example, you are responding to a tender. We are building a school. Normally when a school is built, it comes as a finished product with all the furnitures. So over and above all those things that I've mentioned prior to furniture, you will also have to make sure that the office furniture, if you're gonna get a subcontractor to be doing the furniture for you, because local content also allow you to subcontract. However, whoever you are subcontracting also need to stick to the minimum stipulated threshold. So the subcontractor that you are using is providing you with office furniture. Office furniture is designated at 85. The desk that the learners will be using are designated at 100%. Normally, there's a sick room in the schools nowadays. Then the base and mattress that you will be putting in that sick bay, it's designated at 90%. So you need to make sure that everything that you are going to be using in terms of the input, it's actually complied with in terms of local content criteria. These are other things that goes into there. Like I said, this is not all the stuff that talks to local content. You can get a detailed list even by visiting this website. You can get, because here you will also get the specific instruction note that talks to the minimum threshold. And then when you are actually responding to a tender that has got a local content as a criteria, this is the process that will take place internally for us, that we need to properly plan for and accurately estimate the cost of the required goods. So this is going to be done by the tendering authority, because that will assist us in knowing that is this going to be an 80-20 or a 90-10, so that we know how to actually pitch it when we are talking to you. And our planning, then that will also assist us to identify all the designated local content products that are there and be able to put the right minimum threshold, a relevant one, as per Treasury instruction note. After that, we specify what falls under which designation under the SBD. So our specification, you're gonna find them under MBD or SBD 6.2. When they are not in that document, some department, because sometimes they procure more than one or two items and the form cannot accommodate a list of many items, they will normally, on that section, they will just put refer to addendum whatever. So that will be included in there. And then the declaration certificate, which will be your SBD, and the annexures will be part of the bid. So when you are responding to a quotation or you are responding to a proposal with local content, over and above all the forms that you will be receiving, you will also get this additional forms, which is the local content declaration certificate and the annexures. And then in terms of the tender process, after we received your tender documents, what is going to happen? Firstly, we check for administration compliant. Administration compliant include things like, did you send us the SARS PIN? Did you send your BE certificate? Did you complete all the forms that you were supposed to complete? Did you send the ID documents of shareholders? All those tabs, all those administration work. The CK document, if the subcontracting, do you have the subcontractors documents and details, all those stuff. That will include your administration compliance. And then the next stage will be local content. Remember, I said local content knows no color, knows no BE level. So even if you can be a BE level 100% black, as long as you don't meet the minimum threshold stipulated there for that specific sector, you will be disqualified at that stage. It is also important that you sign all the documents that you will be submitting to us, because if you're gonna be sending documents that are not signed, it can be a disqualification for you as well. Same applies that if you are sending us Annexure C that is not signed, that is signed but it's not completed, that will be a disqualification, because Annexure C is the overall document that will be telling us everything about local content that you had undertaken. So if it's not completed, it will be a disqualification on your side. So you are also urged to keep your documents of local content for the period of 5 years, because after we received your documents, there must be some auditing that has to take place. There must be some verification that has to be taking place through the South African Bureau of Standard and our Auditor General. There are some documents that will be needed. So we need to make sure that you keep those copies for 5 years, so that whenever they will be required, you will be able to provide us with those documents. In conclusion, for part 1, we are saying government is using designation of sectors as a strategy to create jobs and resuscitate local manufacturing. I mentioned this earlier to say we need to move away from being distributors and consumers of imports, but we need to start being manufacturers and consumers of our own products. Public procurement budget should be used to initiate and sustain local manufacturing in the country. The DTI has designated certain sectors and set minimum threshold. Therefore, when we procure as government entities, we are expected to comply with those minimum threshold. You are expected as suppliers to also provide us goods that meet those standards, that meet those minimum threshold. Treasury always issue out instruction notices for all designated sectors for all government entities to comply with when they procure products and services that fall under designated sectors. Like I said, there will be an auditing process that the winning bidder has to go under. So after you have been awarded a tender, you will be expected to go through the auditing so that we can be able to verify everything that you have submitted to us. This is it. It's the end of our section 1 of this presentation. So in the next presentation, I will be focusing on the documentation themselves. Thank you so much. Until we meet again next time.